What's up, y'all? So, I'm just going to start off by talking about the Dipole Repeller. This is an object in space, so, on a large scale. Large scale, think large scale, like observable universe. Like, not just galaxies, beyond galaxies, there's structures that exist that are groups of galaxies called clusters, and then there's superclusters, like the Centaurus supercluster, like the Shapley supercluster, and like the Great Attractor. And these were known, but what was more recently discovered is called the Dipole Repeller. And so, just to read a little bit of this article, this paper written in 2017, that they're saying here we report, we map and identify the attractors and repellers that dominate the local dynamics, the motion of galaxies. Because we see that galaxies are moving in a bulk flow together, and the way we interpreted in the past it was towards whatever gravity was pulling us towards. But this is basically showing that the bulk flow is closely anti-aligned with the repeller. And so the close alignment of the local bulk flow with the repeller provides further support for its dominant role in shaping the local flow. And so, for instance, this image, which is just what comes up on Wikipedia when you search for Dipole Repeller, which is a Creative Commons image by Evan Mason. So I'll just point that out. Thanks for making this. But what we see is like this. There's what's called the Shapley supercluster, and all the galaxy motions in this is like hundreds of millions of light years in terms of like the region of space we're looking at. And we see galaxy motions, peculiar motions, which is once we remove redshift calculations based on cosmological redshift, we just basically say it's this far away, the redshift is this much from the distance, and we'll just extract that portion, and therefore the remaining redshift is caused by peculiar motion or blue shift. And that's how they kind of map out what the galaxy itself is doing. And so what's interesting is there's this region in space that's like a void, and it repels things. So like, well, we don't really see that, right? Like, what we see is just gravity pulling. Pull. We don't see repulsion like this. And so it's a new thing that we just haven't seen it, at least not on this scale. Like, we've seen it, we've definitely seen it countless times, but we don't realize we've seen it. Not on this scale. We've seen it on a small scale, like electron scale, like real small. But on a large scale like this, we haven't seen it. And so you think this is a void, meaning it's low density. There's not anything there, is what they think. But it's clearly like a point in space, like an object, just like a body in space is. So let's talk about this, because there's all sorts of things going on here that are interesting, and shed light onto what's going on all scales. And so we know that there's some kind of particles that exist that functionally are opposite to matter in what's called antimatter. And we know this antimatter moves in a way where it looks almost like time is just reversed. And that's really the difference. Like, that's how it looks. And that's kind of weird. And so we, like instead of moving to the left, it moves to the right in a certain circumstance. And it basically follows the reverse trail that it would have followed otherwise. And we don't know what these particles are. So we're kind of like, what are they? And so the thing is, so let's kind of think about this. The universe is infinite. There's larger and larger particles, and then there's smaller and smaller particles. And then within that, if you place an observer somewhere, the particles around them are going to be in a specific equilibrium, like a 0 point energy for that, like, dimension, if you will, of observers. And anything above that energy is going to look like it's like positive, whereas anything below that energy is going to look negative. And so what essentially happens is it's literally like a negative mass. It still has the mass, like -3 versus 3. It's still 3. It's just -3. So the mass is still 3, like 3. It's just missing 3, so -3. But it's still 3 in that it has a mass. And so what that does, because it's minus, is it's essentially the opposite of the positive. And so minus and positive, like a charge. What is a charge? So this kind of brings us to what a charge is. There's so many things going on. Sorry if I'm not really making sense. I'll do my best. But a charge, so like positive, minus. What is a charge? We just say like charge exists. At this point, charge exists. That's just what it is. It's just some part of the nature of reality that just is. But the reality is it's not like fundamental. It's emergent from the whichever system and its relative environment that it's being observed in. Like so if a system, like a star, radiates whatever amount, say X, it radiates X mass, all the radiation, the light that is coming off of the star, all the radiation is tiny infinitesimal particles of mass. And so if you said per time, a certain amount of mass is radiated, and so that's mass out. Whereas the environment is pushing in on it as well. So the radiation is like a pressure out as well. So it's not just a mass out, it's also pushing outward. And that pressure is also counteracted by the environment. So like if it's in a high pressure environment, then the environment can be high pressure relative to the object. But if the object is high pressure relative to the environment, then it's going to be essentially like the environment's low pressure. But it's all just relative to the circumstances. Like that same system can be moved to a high pressure system, and it won't be the same system in observation anymore. it will depend on the environment that it's in, how it's perceived. So if something radiates more than it pushes out, the pressure of the system is higher than the environment, then that essentially is a flow outward from the system in all directions, outward flow, because it's pushing more than it's receiving. And so it's essentially a positive system, because that's what a positive system is. So if we look at just like a charge, positive charge, like it really is just a bunch of flows out from a central point, whereas a negative is a bunch of flows into a central point. And so the difference in these is a positive is pushing out more than the environment, whereas a negative charge particle is pushing out less than the environment. The environment's flowing inward. It can't push out enough because it's too low energy. And so it's observed as a negative charge. It's dependent on the pressure, though. If the system is in a different environment that is lower pressure than what was once a negative charge, can become observed as a positive charge. It's not that it's inherently that way. It's not fundamentally that way. It's emergently that way and is dependent on the observer. So like, for instance, the dipole repeller, like we see these as some systems in space, huge, so massive that they're beyond the size of galaxies, and yet they are the perfect example of a positive and negative charge. They are a positive and negative charge that are linked to one another by their fields. And what's crazy is, what are their fields composed of? Literally galaxies. Not ether particles like a magnetic field of Earth, but they're so massive, these systems, relative to us, the atoms that we are composed of, that they are like beyond galaxies. But what they are also is a positive and negative charge in the simplest form, even though they're ridiculously complex in terms of just being composed of just like systems that are beyond our understanding in some ways. And so back to antimatter, though. So it's kind of like so a high pressure system, like a star, a planet, a black hole, they're high pressure relative to the environment, and so they're matter. They're composed of matter, not antimatter, and in our perception. And so they radiate particles and they receive particles, but their radiation, so they basically bring in ether particles of gravity, which are infinitesimal. So the input is infinitesimal. The output is macroscopic. It merges the infinitesimal, creates larger particles, and radiates larger particles. So it brings in small, makes large. Whereas, and radiates, brings in small, radiates large. Whereas antimatter brings in large and radiates small. And what's radiating small is literally radiating gravity. It's pushing out the particles that cause gravity, because those are the ones that are so abundant and move at such an infinite velocity relative to us as observers that we see them as producing gravity. And so when it's being radiated from an object, then that object looks as if it emits anti-gravity, because it does. Because it's antimatter, which functionally is just time reversal. So this is something that's going on, is that even though we see time going in the direction we see it, that doesn't mean every observer sees time going in that direction. And this is kind of crazy. Observers can be composed of antimatter. They won't see it as antimatter. They will see it as matter. And then the way they see it as matter is because they see time in the opposite direction. Within the same three-dimensional space, within everything. And so when they look at what we see as matter, it's functionally going in the reverse time direction. And so even though we see it as bringing in gravity infinitesimal and radiating large macroscopic particles, if time's reversed, then suddenly it's bringing in large and radiating small. And so in this like mirror half, antimatter half of the universe, where that time is going in that direction, all that we see is observed as antimatter. This also answers the question, where's all the antimatter? It's in the voids of space, the vacuums. Wherever we think a vacuum is, antimatter is there. And it's doing the same thing as the dipole repeller, just on whatever scale it functionally is on relative to our atoms. I feel like there was more I wanted to say around this. But that's part of antimatter, is that it's just matter functionally where time is in a different direction. And that's totally fine within the universe. Time doesn't have to go in the direction we observe it. It's just that's how we observe it, because that's where we are as observers. But when an observer is composed of some other particle, and they're dependent on their environment, and so they're going to see time in literally the opposite direction. It's just crazy to think about. So anyway, now that I jumped into that stuff, what else is there? I spent a lot of time ranting, raving about Israel and all this stuff. Oh my God. Sorry, guys. I'm going to keep doing it here and there, maybe even now. But I do apologize for being a little extreme. But at the same time, like, some people out there who might be listening might be in positions where they're like, hey, I'm glad you appreciate that this is happening to us and that you recognize how fucked up it is, and that's cool. But like, could you like come back to that and like, let's focus on this, because this is a problem for me, you know? Because they're out there living it. I'm over here you know, just fucking derping my life away, you know, casually going about life because my circumstances aren't so pressing. I mean, they are, but they're not. You know, in the same way as someone who's under the weight of some oppressive system. In the way that, because it's all relative, like I am, but not like that. Like, holy fuck, guys. I was leaving the airport. I think I told this story already. When I was in Israel, I left the airport to come home. I went to the airport to come home. And they just would not let me go through. I was checking out my podcasts a little bit in the past few days, trying to get a grip of what I'm even talking about and what I've said, because I'm just saying things, you know. It's hard to even remember what I said. So a little listening to it helps with just get it, even though I forget again. Like, hey, I wanted to say that there's things that when I've listened to my previous episodes, at least a couple, the more recent ones, more so than the older ones. The last three or so. There's always something I want to say and then I forget. Like the same thing will come up over and over. It kind of makes me want to like take notes almost. Like I gotta almost be more like focused on this. When I listen, I gotta sit down and like listen and like take notes and everything I want to talk about and really like make it kind of a little more informative and a little less kind of floating everywhere. It's election night or day. Election day in the United States. We'll see what happens after that. I didn't vote. I did not vote. I've never voted. And I'm okay with that. You know, every time a vote comes and I don't vote and I think about it as like the day is passing and I'm like, here's another time I just didn't vote. It makes me think like maybe I should vote, but like, guys, don't try to make me vote and don't make me feel bad about not voting. It's something that happens where we try to make each other feel bad about not voting, because that's what they want. They want us to vote, guys. Could you imagine if one year like 0 people voted? They didn't even like bother to like give a shit. No. Just no. You know, the only votes they get are like from people in the system already. Just give them no support whatsoever. Because it's not good. There's so much messed up. Like, why 4 years? It kind of turns it. It's arbitrary, is what it is. You know. Like, if someone comes along with some solutions, like, what the fuck are we doing? Oh, now we're in this fucking system of. Oh, we're doing this though now, so that'll have to wait. That'll have to wait. Doing this now. It's just weird. And then if they have solutions and then they become president, oh, you can only get 8 years and then you're gone. Like, I get it, but at the same time, it's kind of weird. Like, what if someone's like good? Oh no, dude. Get out of here. You had your time. Thanks for making things way better, but next dude's probably gonna do just as well. Like, it's weird. It's in the design, which, I mean, it's to prevent like someone dominating, you know. But that happens anyway. We got people from same families over and over. Like, what the hell? Bush. Clinton. Like, Do we want a monarch? It looks like we want a monarchy. When we rebelled against the freaking monarchy of England, but oh no, we gotta elect a family. It's so weird, guys. Like, it doesn't make sense. If democracy is like legitimately a valid way to like long term bring a prosperous society, then it wouldn't be through one family. Like, why do they have all the answers? Do they? Are you sure? You know, it's a little suspect. Looks a little like someone just got control and just won't let it go. And they got power. There's so much power. And fuck, the Bush family is crazy. Like, when there's families like that in a country that's democratically ran, it just shows people don't really want to think for themselves. Because, yeah, that's good enough. We are more of the same. More of the same's easy. Fucking done. Check. And like, that's like his son, so it's more of the same. Let's go. Next decision. As long as they got that R next to their name or the D or whatever. You know, I don't want to vote for the other side because, oh no. How did that happen? The two-party system? Nonsense. It's nonsense. And then you gotta pick one. And if you don't pick one and you want to go run for presidency, good luck. Because people are tribal. Oh, you're not on my team, dude. I can't vote for you. Don't worry, though. We'll make it easy for you. We'll put a little D next to all the Democrats on your ticket, so you don't even have to think about it. You can just pick your party. Just pick your party. Like, that makes any damn sense. Oh, yeah, they're all just carbon copies of one another. Okay. Think identically for sure. This won't have adverse effects in the long term when we start to see the results of piss poor management from people we elected arbitrarily just because they had a freaking association with some party that we thought was somehow better than the other, even though they're both fucking pretty much shit and just taking our power. Just fucking us. I kept saying shit like that. I'm just fucking us. Been cursing a lot, making me think about like coworkers. Like, I feel bad if coworkers are listening to this and they're like, dude, this guy's crazy. I didn't even know. I didn't even know, man. That dude was just walking through the halls like that. And it's just no one knew. It's like that, like the guy who kills, like a mass murderer or whatever, serial killer, and then the neighbor's like, I had no idea. Not to like compare myself to a serial killer, but you know, there's a lot I don't tell my coworkers. So then when I tell them I have this podcast and I start telling things in the podcast that they might hear, I'm like, oh damn, now I'm telling my coworkers things that I wasn't telling anyone. Now they know, and now I see them all the time. Oh shit, now it's gonna be awkward. Just pretend like nothing going on here. So how do we start a revolution, guys? First of all, it can't be violent. There's no violence. If you're committing violence, then you're probably not standing for whatever revolution it is that's going to take place. So, no violence is essential. Because it puts the argument in a position of what are you gonna do about it? Oh, you're gonna commit violence, huh? Oh, good argument. Bet the world at large will find that persuasive. Oh, that guy's killing everyone. I really want them to control the world. Yeah, that's a perfect way to go about solving things. They're just so strong-willed and determined to just bring peace on Earth with all the chaos that they're inflicting on everyone. I mean, it's something for sure. Fuck them other people that are getting singled out and targeted maliciously by the system. They deserve it for sure. That ain't how people would react, guys. If people are literally starting a revolution, genuinely peaceful, and like coming together as one, and not, requiring people to jump through hoops and just, accepting everyone on a large enough scale where it kind of has like a critical mass. Because that's part of the thing. Like, it's like 100 monkeys. You ever hear 100 monkeys? If one monkey got taught that it can clean the fruit off by dunking it in the water or something. And so it got the sand off of whatever it's eating. It's like, oh, this is nice. I don't have sand on my food. So it taught other monkeys. And so after 100 monkeys were taught the technique, all the monkeys did it. It didn't even need to be taught. They just knew. And that's how it is. It's like a critical mass within the system of humans at large that do the thing like 100 monkeys, and then it just becomes like part of us as a whole, like a common shared characteristic. So we gotta train 100 monkeys, guys. How do we do that? All is one. Good start. It's a good start. That might be all that's even necessary. The rest of it's just fluff. Fill in the details. Just details. Not fluff and details. It's important details, like solutions. Well, here's a technological advancement that will help us in these ways, But, like, that stuff will come from an all-is-one kind of analysis. So, really, that might just be all that's necessary underlying it all. In terms of, like, the 100 monkeys thing. After that, like, it's done. Good luck putting the cork back on that one. Because that's what's happening. It's kind of like there's this truth hidden that may or may not even be known to people. Like, I think some people know, and definitely people know that God is everything. Like, it's in music. It's all over the place. It's in certain religions. It's just it's just not so prevalent that it's, what was I even saying? God damn. It's not so prevalent that I don't know what I was saying, so I don't know what that even was leading into, and if that made any sense as a follow-up to what I was saying. So I can't just keep going because I lost. But it's tough. There's a lot to it. for us to actually like come together in a new system, which is effectively a revolution, it's gonna take so much. It's gonna take money. I mean, if I could create a metal lens that produced energy out of the ether, start a business from it, I would fund this shit out of a revolution on my own dime. I'd be like, let's fucking go. So you were saying when you said that you see, like, people don't put their own money where their belief systems are, because they're just kind of, they just want to do it because they want to do it, you know, like be in politics or whatever, not because they have some answer necessarily that's like making them, you know, they're like being like, oh fuck, I gotta do this thing now that I didn't anticipate because I have this answer that I want to share with people and I have to because it's important. No, it's just like, you know, I kind of want to be famous and control things, make things how I think things should be, and I think things should be this way, so I'm gonna go ahead and be a politician now. No solutions, you know. Just, I think things should be this way because I think that way. But it's not stepping outside. It's still within the scale of things. It's like, it's like an infinite spectrum from 0 to infinity, and like within that spectrum it's always larger, always smaller, and if we stay within the spectrum, and then it's kind of like moving around like an ant, like we're still kind of stuck in this tiny spot in this infinite sea of things, but we can step past that. We can kind of be like, all right, this seems going forever, and it approaches two limits, like one being, if we go in this direction, approaches 0, almost like it's a limit, and then it approaches infinity in that direction, so almost like a limit, and we can go ahead and like step there, but okay, 0, okay, infinity, there, these things are like steps at the end of the infinite spectrum. Even though it's infinite without an end, we can still kind of like extrapolate that end. Don't know why I was saying that, but hey, let's just leave it at that. So there we go. What else happened? Oh my god, I was on Saturday, David DeHilster in his Dissident Science channel had James Maxwell, I think Maxwell, maybe Maxwell, my bad, who is one of the leading Earth expansion geologists for modeling why the Earth expanded. And I was listening, and he lets people come in and talk, and at one point he's like, does anyone have anything to say? And I was already ready, and I raised my hand, and he brought me in. And I was at first I presented, I was like, well, I come from, so he's kind of like, we were going to talk about expanding Earth. We want to talk about expanding Earth. So I come in and I'm like, so my background is I am an engineer, and then I came up with theory of everything, and that led to me saying, well, gravity causes electromagnetic fields which travel in a figure 8, and so Earth's electromagnetic field is composed of particles traveling in a figure 8, and so they merge at the center of the planet, and that produces mass, and then that leads to an internal pressure where the Earth expands, reaching a new steady state. I said that to them, and he's like, I've considered all the explanations, all the models, and I haven't. I was like, I don't know how tied you guys are to certain interpretations. And he's like, James Maxlow, James Max. He says, well, I've considered all the interpretations. And then David DeHilster started talking. And I felt kind of like boxed out. It's like, hey, here's the thing. I know what I'm talking about. I'm not just guessing. I'm not just like almost there and like I kind of got it enough to be like I got some kind of model to like present to people. Like, I'm done. Check, bingo. Like, it's a wrap, guys. It's done. And so when I get kind of like, I felt like he was inviting me in, and then once I actually wanted to say something, it wasn't like, it was essentially like, here's my interpretation. He's like, well, we'll talk about those things some other time. I'm like, dude, I don't have some other time. Like, I'm right here, right now. So as he kept saying things, I'm just like, I was like bursting at the seams. Like, I gotta say something. Because like, James Maxlow kind of reiterated what I said and showed to me that he didn't quite understand what I was saying, which is totally understandable because I mean, it's just like blah, it's hard to like give all the details for why I think the things I think and like what exactly I'm saying. It's kind of just some words and like without with some like footnotes to like clarify. Sometimes it can be kind of hard to follow. But like his interpretation is that the earth expanded and the mass was formed at the boundary of the mantle and the outer core, where called like the D prime layer or some layer D. What is that freaking layer? It's got a specific name. D double prime. Yes. Okay, it is double prime. I think that's how you say it. D double prime. The D double prime layer is where he was suggesting the mass was being formed. And mind you, this is not at the center. It's basically middle between the crust and the center. It's like a midway point. And I was like, I was like, can I just finish what I was saying? Like after he finished talking, I was such an asshole. I was like, can I just finish? Cause like, this is important. Before I came on, they're talking about like trying to get attention to the expanding Earth model. And I'm like, if you don't have a mechanism that's persuasive, like actually the mechanism, i.e. what I'm saying, because that's the actual mechanism, is a magnetic field that the particles merge at the center and literally produce the inner core, which is mass that then basically moves outward over time and produces an internal pressure until a new equilibrium is reached. And like if you don't have that, no one is gonna say plate tectonics is wrong and expanding Earth is true on a large scale. Like society won't say that ever again without an actual mechanism, period. So we're not going to get attention to the expanding Earth model just with evidence that the Earth expanded, because it did expand. It fucking expanded, and that evidence is everywhere. Yes, it is. There's evidence everywhere, and they should recognize it. Absolutely. But they want a mechanism. And I'm not saying a mechanism will immediately change anything, because as you can see, it doesn't. No one freaking listens. But once there's a mechanism, then the argument is much firmer. And it's a big part of the Earth history. I mean, that's another thing, is like, there's no expanding Earth model that really covers the truth of it. Because it used to be one state, and now it's in a different state. So, like, for instance, the Earth is currently expanding at a rate of like 1 centimeter a year. So it's not really expanding. It's steady state. And they look at it and they're like, it's not expanding, guys. So it didn't expand. Hello. So your model's wrong based on that it's not expanding right now. But that's assuming a linear rate of expansion. Whereas a system that goes through a reaction, one change of state to another, it's in a steady state, goes through a phase of change, and then it's in a steady state. It's not like it's just always in a phase of change. There's only one portion of rapid change surrounded by long, almost eternal periods of stability relative to the period of change of the reaction. And I say reaction because it's an activation energy. In order to go from state A to state B requires enough activation energy. Same applies to Earth. In order to go from a single landmass having no oceans to a larger landmass having oceans, what was I saying? I don't know, guys. I forgot what I was saying. I'm not even high. I'm out of weed. No. I might leave it that way. I was thinking about. Usually lasts about 24 hours before that changes, though. We'll see. I'm a bit of an addict. And not just weed either. Lots of things. Things that are, yes, like sugar, almost mutilization. That's the word that comes to mind. In a mental and less physical way. Although physical with like cigarettes and many things. And other things. But what was I saying? But without a mechanism, that's generally what I was saying. It's not gonna get anywhere, no matter how much evidence there is, because that's not the argument they're looking for. They already think plate tectonics is happening. So to just be like, Earth expanded, and here's why we see evidence that it expanded, especially when the time of it is like wrong, the time scale, because like a lot of the expanding Earth models just kind of assume like a steady expansion, slow and steady. They're not picking up on like Earth went through like insane rapid change, and then it reached a new equilibrium. And that period of change was short. A short spurt is like boom. Just like the flood, it was the flood. It was the biblical flood. And there's evidence everywhere. You can look at Google Earth. Like, for instance, Northern Africa. There's clearly water just swept across the continent and deposited sand in the Sahara. And when it swept from the east to the west, and you can literally see where the water drains off of Africa into the oceans, into the Atlantic Ocean, and created islands. It created Cape Verde and the Canary Islands. Created. They're right there. There's literally just like the flow of water comes out into the ocean, and directly where it's pointing is an island. Oh, what a surprise. There just happened to be islands there for no reason, though. Not anything to do with that. The water that came off of the planet, off of Africa, was depositing actual material like sediment, rock, in those locations where they were basically coming out off of the continental Africa and into the ocean, and just building like this pile of sedimentation there that then was so high of a pile that it literally was high enough to be above sea level. And voila, there's some islands. Like, that's one thing. There's all sorts of things, though. But most of the evidence is that it was rapid. And it's not accounted for. Like, most of these models are in millions, billions of years. Like they were talking about on the podcast, before I came on that and talked to them about like a idea of an expanding Earth where you could change the date and see the Earth's previous state at that time, where it was smaller and the continents were in different positions, and scroll across these millions of years, billions, and watch it change. But like that's all based on radiometric dating, which again is not a good system. It's not even not good. It's not a valid system of dating. Simply put, there's nothing about it that's valid. The only thing we can use radiometric dating for is relative dates. Relative ages, not absolute ages. Like, this is older than that. How much older? I don't know. Like, it seems based on radiometric dating that it's much older, but older. Okay, yes, older. Like, we can kind of maybe go that way, where like relative age is more clearly something we can extract from that process, but absolute age, because like if the Earth expanded, then the environment went through a rapid change, and likely a lot of decay happened in a short period of time. And then when we look at it, it looks like all this decay happened, and then we base it off of the current decay rate, which, like, if you imagine like a tank of water, and that water starts to, and you have a hose connected to the end, and all that water starts to come out. Initially, it's gonna have high pressure. It's gonna be coming out. But as that water in the tank drops, pressure gets lower, the flow gets lower, and then it reaches like a trickle. And that's where we're at now, is a trickle of the decay that we used to have. Just a trickle. And we're like, oh, this trickle? That's how it always was. It's always a trickle. Always it was this way. When in reality there was like this mountain of decay in an instant. And that mountain of decay in an instant, when the Earth expanded, basically accounted for billions of years of decay at the current rate. right there in an instant. And because we extrapolate linearly, assuming uniform processes where there is this just assumption that the extrapolation is valid, then we're going to come up with nonsense. So back to the D double prime layer. I haven't looked into it that much, but it's real interesting. Because, first of all, we know that when earthquakes reach this, the reason we know this layer is there is because of the earthquakes. And we know that when the earthquakes reach it, that they change. And so we're able to basically shape this layer based off of it. And what's interesting is this D double prime layer, which is at the edge of the mantle and outer core boundary. So if the Earth is hollow and the outer core is gaseous, where like whatever the life forms there are breathing the outer core air, if that's happening, then that would mean the D double prime layer is the inner crust. And so what's interesting is the D double prime layer, if I'm saying that right, sorry guys if I'm not, it is equal in dimensions, like the thickness. It's basically, it has different areas of thickness, just like the outer crust. So it has regions that are like 20 kilometers thick, and then it has regions that are like 60 kilometers thick. But it's the same general thickness as the crust and the same complexity. So it has this like mountainous terrain to it in complexity. And we're able to tell that by earthquakes. But we think of this layer as, we don't really think of it as maybe like a actual crust of the inner Earth, even though it has the same characteristics as the crust in a lot of ways that it functionally is. Because it is an inner crust. That's what I'm getting at. It is the inner crust. The D double prime layer is the inner crust of the Earth. And so because it is the inner crust of the Earth, it's as complex and as thin as the outer crust. Which is crazy that we observationally know that this layer is like that. Whether or not we recognize it to be an inner crust is interesting. Like, we actually have determined that. There's comparisons between this layer and the outer crust, just in geology, not in my crazy little world of whatever conspiracy theory, crackpot, you know, like all those things that people will throw at me. Not in my world, but in like the geology world, we've recognized the layer to be as complex as the surface of the Earth. But other layers aren't like that. Like, it's not like everywhere it's just like equally crazy like that. Like between the D double prime and the outer crust, it's kind of just mantle. Just mantle. I mean, there's plumes and things that are like these like hot spots, as we interpret them, at least. Like, we don't quite understand what they are. I don't understand what they are. They're interesting in terms of what's going on with them, but generally speaking, it's just like one layer, whereas it hundreds of kilometers thick. Thousands? How big is the mantle? — 3,000 kilometers, so just about. Trying to find the D double prime thickness. Outer core about 2,400 kilometers thick, 1,500 miles. That's totally enough. Enough space for like an inner planet to actually functionally exist. Mind you, to get to the inner planet. So one of the things. How does anyone get to this inner planet that supposedly exists? Like, that doesn't make sense. Well, they fucking dig it down and go through the mantle. Hundreds of thousands of miles, thousands of kilometers. No. That can't happen, dude. So there's no one there, you fucking crazy man. And there's no way for them to get out and be interacting with us, so fuck off with your stupid ideas. But, so going back to the magnetic field, doop, 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 these particles travel in a figure 8 pattern. So imagine that you got a stream of ether going through the earth. And all of that ether is generally going through the poles. Well, what happens when water runs down, like, say, the side of a mountain? It carves a path through it. Because it carves it. It etches it into it. Well, so would the magnetic field of the earth. It would etch a hole, literally, into both poles. Which is interesting. Because if you Google Maps the earth, any map, it doesn't matter. Any map that you look at, they just don't even show the poles. It's just grayed out. Like, maps. Let's check out the pole. So, like, first of all, this is interesting. Like, why can't I turn this? Like, I want to scroll up. Earth is a ball, so, like, I can turn a tennis ball any which direction, right? Why can't I turn this? Why do they want me to, like, focus on the equator? It's kind of strange that, like, and, like, you can't look directly at the top of the Earth. Like, what the fuck? Like, hello? I want to look at the poles, guys. What is up with that? And then you come down here, down to the pole, and there's this fucking spot. Like, what is this? Dude, what is this? You know? Like, why can't I literally can't get any closer to it? I can't, like, right here. Like, let's say that spot was right here. I could just be like, here's that spot. Zooming in, 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 zooming in. It's good. It's good because, you know, it makes sense. But at the poles, they're just like, nah, you don't need to see this. Like, isn't that interesting? Like, let's just say, if you were to be like making maps of the earth, and you got this satellite going around the earth, and you were like, damn, dude, this satellite's covering the whole earth, but, you know, fuck the poles. Fuck them. We don't even want to look at the poles. Why would we want to look at the poles? It's stupid. Poles are stupid, dude. Like, you can't. You fucking can't. And when you try to, it turns into some fucking dot. It's like, where is the shit, guys? What is going on? They're just like, Google 2020. Why is Antarctica just covered in Google 2020? That's funny. But you can't look at the poles, guys. What the fuck? It's so weird. And then there's stories. And this dude, I think his name is Paul Bird. U.S. pilot. North Pole. Hollow Earth. Bird. Richard E. Byrd. American naval officer and explorer. Recipient of the Medal of Honor, the highest honor for valor given by the United States. So, like, you know, some kind of credentials as a respectable and, like, conscious person. Like, they're not just spouting things necessarily. And so, expedition leader across the Atlantic, a segment of the Arctic, a segment of the Antarctic plateau, claimed that his expeditions had been the first to reach both the North Pole and the South Pole by air. Where is this? Where? Hollow Earth. Oh my God, how is this not here? How is the term hollow not part of it? Okay. Since 1926, blah, blah, blah. Claimed that Bennett had confessed to him months after the flight that he and Byrd had not reached the pole. Bennett died on April 25th, 1928. So, like, almost very quickly after this dude dies, after being claimed to have said that they didn't go to the pole. That's interesting. I didn't know that part. Because this dude died, yeah. 1996 release of Byrd's diary of the May 9, 1926 flight revealed erased but still legible sextant sights that sharply differ with Byrd's later June 22 typewritten official report. How is this, dude? This Wikipedia isn't even saying it's not talking about the hollow earth. What the fuck, dude? Is this a quote of his? There comes a time when the rationality of men must fade into insignificance and one must accept the inevitability of the truth, capital T. I am not at liberty to disclose the following documentation at this writing. Perhaps it shall never see the light of public scrutiny, but I must do duty and record here and record here for all to read one day. In a world of greed and exploitation of mankind can no longer... In a world of greed and exploitation, mankind can no longer suppress that which is truth. Allegedly wrote his encounter with a lost civilization in Antarctica. According to hollow earth theorists, Byrd met ancient race underground in the South Pole. Why this writing is kind of poor, but that's okay. According to Byrd's diary, I have just attended a staff meeting at the Pentagon. I have stated fully my discovery and the message from the master, capital M. All is duly recorded. The president has been advised. I am now detained for several hours. I am interviewed intently by top security forces and a medical team. It was an ordeal. I am placed under strict control via the national security provisions of this United States of America. I am ordered to remain silent in regard to all that I've learned on the behalf of humanity. Incredible. I am reminded that I am a military man and I must obey orders. So he's being told not to tell people that he fucking found a society inside the earth. See, like, this isn't just me saying, listen, people. Wow, Mammoth Cave. Whoa, that's crazy. I've been to Mammoth Cave. I've been there. They're saying Mammoth Cave goes down through the earth. Through it like that. Wouldn't that be something? Damn, that's crazy. Crazy. Agartha. Antarctica's secret. Admiral Byrd's flight through the North Pole and right back out. He met the master, the city's leader, who told him of his concerns about the surface world. Our interest rightly begins just after your race exploded the first atomic bombs over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan. It was that alarming time we sent our flying machines, the Flugelrods, to your surface world to investigate what your race had done. You see, we have never interfered before in your race's wars and barbarity, but now we must, for you have learned to tamper with a certain power that is not for your man, mainly that of atomic energy. Our emissaries have already delivered messages to the power of your world, and yet they do not heed. Apparently, the government knew about Agartha before Byrd. Places such as Tibet, the Great Pyramid of Giza, and the North Pole all have tunnels leading to Agartha. I mean, this shit's crazy, for sure. It's crazy. I'm not saying it's wrong. It's just crazy. And I'm not saying it's right. That's what I'm saying. it's just wow, you know. Something of note that I point to, that this dude, you know, like, we can't just like discredit that this guy wrote this in a diary. He has a Medal of Honor. I mean, maybe it happened. Because, like I was saying, man, you know, all those things I was saying about how the earth is hollow and the society could live there, and maybe it does, they might be true. And then if that's the case, then this could be true too. And it would make sense because they'd be a society that would be conscious that of atomic power, but also they wouldn't like, they would know of the concepts, but they wouldn't be like barbarically, childishly using them, because that's kind of what it is. We're just children, you know. They're just an older society. It's not like they're like like gods next to us. I mean, they are kind of, in a way. We're all God. They're probably more conscious of their godhood as a society. They probably know it. And so in a way they're like gods to us, but they're not. Like, they also went through the same shit as us and learned their lessons the same way as us, and that's how they got to where they are as a society now. If it exists. If it all exists, you know. some other things. Another interesting thing about the expanding Earth. So people will try to guess where Atlantis might have been, based on like Plato and a couple other things, and it's kind of limited to areas generally associated with like the Strait of Gibraltar and the Mediterranean, like this general region. And so like someone, for instance, a big one that got real popular recently was the Riccati structure, which is in Africa. This thing. Is this it? Where the fuck is it? Oh, here it is. Okay, there it is. I was like, where is it? Scroll out. It's called the Eye of the Sahara. We don't know what this thing is, and so Atlantis, the city of Atlantis, was said to have like ring structures. So people were like, well, maybe a city was here and there was water because there's signs there was water. So like, as we can see around the Riccati structure, there's all this like flow of water that went through this region, like massive flooding, like all this region of around the Riccati structure was flooded, as well as north in like Morocco here, this area. And I was saying earlier, the flow literally comes out at the edge of the continent, and then right there are islands, and then the flow comes out at the edge of the continent near the Riccati structure, and then islands in that direction. And mind you, the Earth was expanding in the process, so this could have been over here and then expanded as the layers were built up, and so it may have formed closer but moved outward, creating these islands there. But anyway, but people say maybe that's Atlantis. But the thing is, like, Atlantis is still said to be underwater, where this structure's just not. And it's not it just wouldn't fit all the Atlantis stuff in like in a good way. Like, everything fit. It kind of fits, especially the circular, like, many layers of outward circles of the city of Atlantis. But that's really it. And just also like little things that are maybe given too much weight individually. And what none of these models, none of these analyses, and where they're where they're trying to figure out where Atlantis was, none of them are accounting for that the Earth expanded. They're all like, okay, where's Atlantis? So some will think like these islands around here, some of this like mountainous stuff at the bottom of the Atlantic in the center, it may be there, and that's buried underwater, so that's maybe. But like so if the Earth expanded, so let's say that Africa and North America, South America, all this was together. So if South America and Africa are together, then this corner, the corner of Brazil there that's sticking out, would go up in the Gulf of Guinea there, and then North America. So like, all of the Himalayas, all of Central America, perhaps. So like, looking at Central America, interestingly, there's this region between the Yucatan Peninsula and Honduras in the ocean floor. It looks like it ripped apart here, like literally. Like the Yucatan Peninsula was connected to Honduras, and it ripped apart, and then it filled in with a new layer that wasn't quite as high elevation, because it was just like formed from the release of molten material from the earth as the earth was expanding, forming a like baseline layer kind of thing. And so anyway, Central America would basically wrap around the side of South America, whereas like Florida, eastern United States would go along like the western half of northern Africa. So like Florida would be around Mauritius kind of area. And so what that would mean is that, well, what would be around the Strait of Gibraltar, around this area? So also going back to how the Yucatan Peninsula and Honduras, I don't want to keep saying this because I really don't want to talk too much over a map, but I am, and I'm going to put in the video so you guys can see on YouTube if you want, but I'll try not to talk too much over a map. So between the Yucatan Peninsula and Honduras, the ocean floor is like split apart. But that's not the only place on Earth that happened. So when the Earth expanded, there was like fracturing in lots of places, and there was essentially like shock waves of energy that caused fractures like this to occur. And interesting, like Cuba, Dominican Republic, and Puerto Rico, like all this likely was formed as a result of this like fracturing that sent out a wave of energy. And this fracturing sending out a wave of energy is even evidenced by the formation of a island arc in like Barbados, Dominica, Martinique, St. Lucia, all this stuff here. Island arcs are caused by a shock wave of energy from the direction of the Caribbean Sea, and then where it's settled, creating an arc from a focal point, which maybe was around here, sent out a shock wave as it was finding its new positioning that rippled along here, create along the Caribbean Sea, creating above it new islands, and then an island arc where like the wave was settling. And island arcs are like between South America and Antarctica. The same thing happened. The two continents split apart, sending out a shock wave of energy, producing an island arc, and islands along the top side and the bottom side of the shock wave of energy. And so over by Spain and Portugal, we see the same kind of thing happening in the Bay of Biscay here. Biscay? I don't know. In this area, there's a fracturing of Spain away from the like France. And so like this region may not have been exactly in this shape. Like this might be an after a fracturing occurred, and then it kind of swept down, closing up the Strait of Gibraltar. But anyway, if we were to look over at the reason I say that is because it's not positioned exactly at the Strait of Gibraltar, so I kind of have to set up what I'm gonna say. I would say maybe might be Atlantis, and I don't see anyone looking there. So if we kind of look over at Florida, the eastern United States and say, well, Florida is around like Mauritius, and then the eastern United States hugs up along Western Africa when it was a smaller globe before the Earth expanded, which is when Atlantis would have existed, was before the Earth expanded, before the flood. Earth expanded in the process of the flood, and so Atlantis would have been in a world without the oceans. And so in this general region, though, what's interesting is along the coast of North America, if we come up into Nova Scotia and beyond, there's this region here called the Flemish Cap, and it's pretty big. It's not very explored. It's kind of if the ocean floor wouldn't be so high, or if the ocean water wasn't there, if Earth had been as it was before, like this maybe would have still had like water around it based on this region. There's a region of this where it's just lower in elevation between Flemish Cap and the continental North America, not continent, and North America. There's a region like a drop in the elevation. It's almost like had this existed previously without this salt water here, and it actually been exposed to the air, then maybe it still would have had some water around it. So anyway, this Flemish Cap, that's what I think, if anything, is Atlantis. If there's an Atlantis, see, it's all the way over here. No one's looking all the way into North America because they're thinking of Strait of Gibraltar. You know, they're like, well, it's got to be over here somewhere because that's what everyone's saying. But what's not being said is that the Earth expanded. And so all of eastern North America was over there. It was over there. They were together. And so Flemish Cap was over there. And maybe it was Atlantis. And we don't really know much about Flemish Cap. I mean, it's kind of explored in that people have drilled into it a little bit, but you never know what we could find if we like really look there, but we don't know. And then it's like the water there is really rough, so it's also hard to even explore it well, which is interesting. Like, it's exceptionally rough there because there's fishing here. This is a popular fishing region, but it's also highly dangerous to fish there because the water is so rough. So like exploring the ocean floor there, people just don't do it that much. And we may just not even know, like I haven't really been able to find all that much in terms of any like research of what's going on down in Flemish Cap. Like there's a few studies, especially like more general things like just, you know, as if it's just this place, you know. They're not like, is this Atlantis? No one's looking at it like, is this Atlantis? You know, because that would be a whole different technique of looking like under, because there'd be like, we'd have to find ways to see if there's any kind of artifacts there, some kind of remnants of the society, and if it was Atlantis, maybe there would be. I mean, even though there's a global flood, maybe there would be enough that we could be like, okay, there's some weird shit going on here. And it does seem like maybe it could have been in the position where it was Atlantis, and maybe it is. That to me is the best guess I can come up with for Atlantis, which probably existed. I mean, they say it was continent size in some places. And that's one of the things that goes against this, because it's not, I mean, it's not small. Flemish Cap is pretty big, but it's not like huge. It's not like, whoa, that thing's so, that's a continent for sure underwater right there. Wow. It's like hundreds of miles maybe in diameter, 100 or 200. Let's say in radius, whatever. Whatever. Doesn't matter. But it's small. It's not that big. But it's big enough that some form of society might have been there for some reason. I don't know why. It would be like the place if it was that small in this entire globe. Assuming the globe is just like the size of the continents and with no oceans. If there was a smaller Earth and Atlantis was Flemish Cap somehow. Like, it's still a tiny portion of the total landmass, so like why would it be so important? Like, that they only live there? Like, if they were some prosperous society that was everywhere, then why would, like, we would find stuff everywhere? And if they were only there, that's kind of weird. That doesn't make sense either. But I don't know. That's another thing is it's Atlantis. So that ties into everything else I've been saying in a strange little way. It's not that important or anything. I just wanted to point it out, mainly because I would like to find out if it was in fact Atlantis. Maybe someone will be driven enough to like research and explore the area with their capacities that they have that actually can like find stuff. Like, what's it called? LiDAR, laser detection, underground stuff. I don't know if you can do that underwater. We're just like drilling and hoping to find within the drill some kind of sign of life, of human life from a past society. Like some artifacts, something to show people live there. Even though it's buried as fuck underwater, which would if there were artifacts there, it would throw everything that we think off. Because how the fuck was there a society under the oceans millions of years ago? Makes no damn sense in a place that was predicted by an expanding Earth model. If there was a society, if there's artifacts there, that would be nuts. Oh my god, could you imagine what we would find too? Some like device that like unlocks some new technology. And if so, then maybe that's how they found it themselves. It's always just like some technology that some things are just passed on by circumstances as we kind of figure our way out, and aren't necessarily uncovered by the people themselves, kind of like aliens giving technology, like that may happen where it's we just find it like Roswell or something, reverse engineer, and then someone else finds it from us and reverse engineers, and someone else. So it's this long line of like no one actually created it because God did it. Underneath it all, like that technology was made by God. Maybe. That would be crazy. Anyway, I'm just supposing though. You know, I'm not like attached to any of this stuff really. Not like my physics concepts and prophecy interpretations. What else is there? So I spent 3 months in Jerusalem. I said I spent 3 months in Israel. I want to specify, I spent like a week in Tel Aviv, a couple days in Haifa, and then the rest of the time in Jerusalem. While I was in Tel Aviv, bombs were going off. It's crazy. The Iron Dome. So Israel has this missile defense system that shoots down missiles. And when I was there in 2014, in like August, September time frame, they were fucking shooting missiles into Tel Aviv. It was crazy. The Hezbollah, I think it was Hezbollah. I mean, they were just shooting them. They weren't hitting anything. And they got the Iron Dome. It's fucking expensive. That's the thing. It's expensive. You want to shoot missiles coming into your country out of the sky? That's gonna cost a couple bucks. Guys. They got a small country, so they can kind of do it, but they have what's called the Iron Dome, and it was fucking in operation when I was in Tel Aviv. Kind of crazy. Since it's just the life of someone in Israel. And then it creates this, like, it's a mess. Because if someone's, like, standing for Islam by shooting missiles, they're just giving reason to the other side to impose its will, you know? It's like a bully who keeps picking at you. Just picking away, throwing things at you, trying to stir up some action out of you. And maybe I'm doing that in my own way right now. My bad, everyone. Oh, shit. I don't even know what kind of effects this could have. But the truth is, it's necessary. So, shut up. No, I'm just kidding. Oh, you don't want to know about the truth? You just want to live in fucking... like that dude with the mustache in the Matrix. He's like, I just want to forget. I want to live in ignorance. Ignorance is bliss, he says. You know. Sounds like the words of someone who's pretty ignorant, though, because, you know. Oh, that's so insightful. Ignorance is bliss. Wow. It's insightful. Are you sure? Are you sure it's not some ignorant shit someone said? Yeah, seems like it. I'm not saying it's not bliss, but like long term, It's like things go out of order if we're just kind of going about life and not picking up after ourselves, if you will. So what do we do? Oh, this is another thing. I'm just looking at this. So in Canada, there's all sorts of impact craters. And one of them, the Clearwater impact craters, is a dual... I think it's called a Clearwater. There it is. It's a dual impact crater, supposedly. And what's interesting is, well, they're like... well, there's two craters next to each other, so it was probably from, like, the same object that broke up as it came in through the atmosphere, and then it created these two craters, and that's what they thought. And then they dated the craters, and one crater is like 100 million years older than the other crater, according to radiometric dating, which is wrong, but that's besides the point. According to interpretation, these things did not form simultaneously, and so what that means is that these two craters right next to each other, just arbitrarily, by happenstance, were hit by an object from space right next to each other, which I read a paper. Basically, the paper said that this could only happen like once per planet. And you know, like, there's another one like right here, guys, right here. You see it? You see it? Do you see it yet? Oh my God, you see it yet? Like, why is this a circle? And why does it have similar shapes in the middle here? Oh, look at this. You know, Hudson fucking Bay is just made by one of these here at the very least. Likely, like, this whole structure is related to some kind of... Because there's other portions, I don't know, like over here. It doesn't have the same circular shape as over here, which is... This one's blatantly obvious. But it's right there too, you know, and it's fucking huge. We don't call this an impact. Oh no, this is not an impact. It just happens to have this circular shape just because. Not an impact. Mind you, none of these are impacts because they're not. They're volcanic in origin, which is why they're localized. Like, here's another one. They're all over Canada. They're everywhere. I'm literally just looking at Google Maps and seeing them because they're all over Canada. And then there's somewhere in Canada that has a magnetic anomaly. It's called like the Tega magnetic anomaly. I don't know, Canada. Did you mean Tamagami? Temagami. There it is. Temagami. The Temagami magnetic anomaly, resulting from a large buried geological structure in the Canadian Shield. So, I'm not sure if this is the best picture, because there's two structures here. There it is. There's a labeling. This is what I'm looking for. One of the structures is called the Temagami anomaly. The other is called the Sudbury Igneous Complex. And these two structures are underground in Canada, right next to each other. And what's really interesting about them is there are literally flow lines from the southeast, I think, the southeast direction, assuming this is southeast. This might just be like east. But as if there was a shockwave of energy and then it kind of hit a barrier where it just created like a, that's where it's going to stop. That's just where it's settled. And it produced this anomaly. And maybe the shock wave was like lensed differently, so it produced two effects. Because like this was made in one event. Like these two structures formed simultaneously. There's no way these structures next to each other having these lines that are parallel, that are part of them, like they're part of them, just happen to form separate from each other. I don't know. Just some thoughts. Food for thought. Australia has similar things going on. Like places that are considered craters. I looked all over. I started looking at craters. There's craters in places like in Australia, like right here. If you're looking, if you're not looking, I'm just looking at a region of Australia that's just like clearly formed by lava flows, like a lot of lava flows. The whole region is just lava flows. And in these regions of clearly lava flow, they find shattered cone or shocked quartz, and guess what? Somehow impact, even though it's clearly lava flow. Wait a minute, guys. If it's clearly formed by lava flow, maybe not impact. Maybe. Just a thought. Even in those circumstances, on top of that lava flow, there was an impact. Yeah, all that lava there, it just, it formed the lava, and then an impact happened, and that created the shocked quartz. Boom. It's really crazy how that lava had nothing to do with it. Oh my god, and then like Fiji. God, Fiji is nuts. Just a vortex. Colliding waves. Spinning in some kind of vortex. Mariana Trench. It's crazy. I'm not sure what the region is called that forms the Mariana Trench. It's shadowed. It's like an echo. You can see the echo. Like here's a stamp. There's a stamp of the Mariana Trench. The motion as it moved before it reached like its more extended version where it kind of like bows out. It's much more like a flat motion and much more like a paddle than like a hook. Becomes like it looks like Florida, the structure in its initial shadow form, because it leaves behind like a imprint of some moment in time, some reason, where it was there, and then the motion continues, and then it basically reaches like a point where it stops, and it creates this huge trench area, this really deep Mariana Trench. And this wouldn't happen like over millions of years. There wouldn't be a shadow of the motion. Like, it's crazy. It's right. It's imprinted in the ocean floor, the motion of this region. And this, what's happening here is likely that there's a shock wave of energy that's hitting the continents, and then it bounces back. It doesn't just keep going. It bounces back. And so, like Japan, all the islands on the east, along like the, especially volcanic, they're all pretty much volcanic in the Ring of Fire, but all the islands along the edge of the Pacific are actually, they're not curved as if the focal point is the Pacific. They're curved as if they're the focal point of the wave, where the energy came from, is in the direction of the continents. And that's because the energy is in the direction of the continents, and then it moves towards the continents, and then it bounces off the continents and comes back, and it shoves all this debris, all this like rock, and forms mountains and volcanic mountains, forms all of Japan. That's why they're arced like this. Like, they're not just arbitrarily arced. They're the whole arc of everything around, well, maybe not the United States, but the islands. The reason they're formed like that is because they're reflecting off of the continents and bouncing back and producing like these sections of waves that are reflections off of the continents. And this is happening in the Pacific, but especially observable in the Western Pacific. Like, there's not islands on in the west coast of the United States like that, or off of the west coast of South America. Like, the islands are formed all like basically starting in Alaska, and then going down through the Mariana Trench, but also along down through like the Philippines here. And there's another, the Malaysian archipelago, I think it's called, Indonesian archipelago. Not sure, whichever. The island arc here that starts all the way up in freaking what is this? Myanmar, in the Andaman Sea, Bay of Bengal here. All the way up, the arc goes all the way down to basically Australia. And then interestingly, there's this like which I haven't really looked at before. I'm just noticing this now. I'm just going to point it out. It's almost like the wave hit the Papua New Guinea area, West Papua, and it curled in on itself because it hit this land, and it created this like hooking section at the very end of the archipelago, at the because the wave was bent, and then again it just like stamps it and stop, just like, and so because at some point the energy, it drops enough that it no longer can move all the stuff, and the stuff just kind of stops wherever it is. It just stops there. And now we got these arcs, these island arcs, and mind you, this is all volcanic because it's formed in the presence of water. And if you're looking at hollow or expanding Earth, and trying to figure out like where exactly the continents fit. Like some of it's a little complicated because like this probably none of the islands on Earth existed. None of them existed. They were all formed in this process. I would say maybe likely all of the South China Sea, Thailand, Singapore, this whole region was formed, all of the islands, in the process of the Earth expanding, and there wasn't even any of these islands. So if we're like trying to figure out what the shape of like how the continents fit together on a smaller globe, while still thinking that these islands were like part of it, and trying to like work them in. Like maybe some of these things didn't even exist. There's always the possibility that some of these things did not even exist in the past. So another thing, so just like in the Mariana Trench where there's the shadow imprint of the wave of energy reflecting off of China and then bouncing back, presumably, and then creating this like Mariana Trench with a imprint of its motion en route to being the Mariana Trench. In the same way, down in Australia and New Zealand, there's this shape of New Zealand that's almost like it like has some of Australia's like Australia was in a different position and then it just left like some material behind in its motion, just in a very similar way, where like Tasmania was like over top this, and then like the layer just like sheared as the continent moved, and it left behind the sheared layer, and then the layers above it continued to move on, which then made it lower than the rest of the region, so it became submerged to a degree. Just some throwing some things out there. I mean, I think I looked at this before, and there were some discrepancies in the actual dimensions. Like, it didn't really fit over top each other very well, so I think. So that may not actually be as true as some of these things, but damn, the vortexes. I mean, clearly waves of energy are crashing, just and then frozen in time. It's crazy. There's flood evidence everywhere, by the way. Everywhere. It's so crazy how much flood evidence there is. It's overwhelming, like the western United States. Like, look at this. Nevada, Utah. The ripples of Nevada and Utah and so on, like, that's formed by water for sure. Grand Canyon, flood. Grand Canyon, we think, well, it's carved out from the Colorado River across millions of years, but like, the thing is, if that happened, the walls wouldn't be as steep as they are because they would slowly cave in and remove the sediment, and so it would be much more like flattened. For amongst many other reasons, that's not what happened. So basically, the earth was flooded, and then a pool of water formed around the Grand Canyon, to the east of the Grand Canyon, and at some point it burst. And when it burst, all that water flooded through the region and carved out the Grand Canyon. And then once it was carved out, rivers that passed through the region used that path. And then we're looking at it like, well, the Colorado carved it. Well, no. That's just water doing water things, following the path that it's going to follow, and following specifically a path that was already carved for it by the flood. There's
crazy amounts of evidence that the Grand Canyon just cannot be the way that we interpret it in terms of its history and how it formed. That's just one of many, though. That's the thing, is it's everywhere. The evidence is everywhere. Another tidbit, and I don't know how to check this, because people will suggest that the Deccan traps in India went off simultaneously to the Chicxulub impact crater being formed. And so they're like, well, if this impact happened, maybe it sent some kind of wave of energy through the planet, and that focused somehow on the Deccan traps. But the issue with that is it wouldn't be in a position relative to Chicxulub to have sent this wave of energy to that position. It wouldn't have done that based on its position right now. But that's under the position right now. Not the positions if the Earth had expanded. Because maybe. So I don't even know. I don't know. And it would be really interesting to know. If the Earth was accurately put back together on a smaller globe, and we could figure out where exactly Chicxulub was, and then where what's opposite to a smaller globe, Chicxulub, it may be that India, the Deccan traps, are opposite on a smaller globe, so that it's almost like resonates from one side to the opposite side, and all the points come back in, and boom, Deccan traps go off. Where Chicxulub was in my interpretation, the earthquake that there was an earthquake. There was a earth-shattering earthquake that was related to Chicxulub somehow. Maybe that was just where the energy resonated from, so much so that it made it look like an impact. I don't know. Maybe it's not even formed by a volcanic kind of thing, but by just a shaking, just this electrical surge almost. That's a point, and then it looks like a circular thing, all impact craters, but it's really a shock wave of energy that creates in this instance a earth-shattering earthquake that then resonates through the planet, and at the opposite side the Deccan traps go off. Anyway, how long have I been talking? 2 hours. That's pretty good, guys. I'm gonna go ahead and call it then. That's cool. I don't know if it doesn't matter. I'll put I'll just put the video in my video. I don't really feel like editing too much. I'd like to make it look real nice, the video, and going back and forth between me and my desktop and stuff, but I'll probably just mostly get a general concept of what I'm talking about, and maybe put some things up over top on the video, but I don't care that much because this is for a podcast anyway, so sorry guys if I talk too much over top of map and things in my podcast. But sometimes it's good to have pictures, even if there's not everyone has access to them, but you can always go look. So if you're able to access my podcast, you can access the Earth in many of its map forms, and yeah. So I'm gonna call it a day. Peace, y'all.